What comes to mind when someone says silent movie? Some people think of actors like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, who made audiences laugh just by the way they moved their bodies around, while other people think of horror films like Nosferatu, which terrified audiences with delicate use of light and shadow. Even though these movies are what people think of immediately, there are so many great uses of the silent form, and I think it's fascinating how movies can create such strong feelings without any spoken dialogue and minimal soundtrack. In this video, I'm going to give a rough history of silent movies, talk about what makes them so special, and give recommendations of some of my favorite silent movies within a few different categories. The first silent movies were less about entertainment and more about documenting the world. Some of the pioneering filmmakers of this time were the Lumiere brothers and Georges Méliès. The Lumiere brothers changed the filmmaking process from an archaic system which was difficult to film and display to a more modern system which isn't too far removed from how movies work today. And their short films simply show life in France at the time, with their two most well-known shorts being the arrival of a train and workers leaving the Lumiere factory. Although not movies in the traditional sense, these two shorts are indicative of the start of cinema, and as such are important from that symbolic perspective. Georges Méliès similarly began his filmmaking career documenting life. He was a magician, so his earliest films are just recorded versions of his magic acts. Eventually, Méliès combined his magic with some storytelling and early special effects to create short films like Haunted Castle. One of the signatures of Méliès' films is having objects disappear or change through an invisible edit, like this chair moving and then turning into a ghost. One of his most popular and most imaginative short films is A Trip to the Moon, which sees a group of people get shot to the moon and then fight with the creatures living on the moon. This short film is so popular because of its whimsical visual style and the sense of wonder that the film creates. These early silent short films aren't comparable to movies that we watch today, but they laid the foundation for an evolution of film as a medium, with this evolution being furthered by the comedy acts of Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. One of the most prolific genres of movies in the silent era is the silent comedy, led by actors Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. These two actors approached comedy from different angles. Although they both relied on physical comedy, Buster Keaton utilized more over-the-top stunts and gags, while Charlie Chaplin's films involved more subtle physicality and emotion. Charlie Chaplin's tramp character appears in numerous films and serves as a character that represents a form of the American dream that audiences can relate to and aspire to, appearing in films like City Lights and Modern Times as someone who's down on his luck and falls in love with a woman and finds himself thrust into a situation that he's not prepared for, having to suddenly be a boxer in City Lights and having to be a tightrope walker in the circus. As these stories play out, Chaplin utilizes physical gags that emphasize the silly, aloof nature of Chaplin's tramp character. This combination of melodrama and comedy was a hit with audiences of the time because it provided a character that audiences could relate to and empathize with who also made them laugh, balancing out the character's bad luck. Buster Keaton, on the other hand, focused more on grand stunts and physical comedy that felt almost like a cartoon. Keaton's biggest stunts are death-defying and provide incredible spectacle, while some of his best gags feel like they're straight out of a cartoon with the way everything perfectly falls into place. Where Charlie Chaplin focused on the emotional impact of the film, Buster Keaton tended to focus more on the technical aspects of this film with incredibly choreographed stunts, like the train sequence in The General, phenomenally edited sequences like this dream sequence in Sherlock Jr., and dynamic camera work that puts Buster in the middle of chaos, like this sequence from The Cameraman. Neither comedian is necessarily better than the other, they just focused on different aspects of comedy and made movies that blew audiences' minds when they released and are still impressive to watch even today. Just as comedy movies don't rely on a story as much as they do emotions, silent horror movies similarly unsettled audiences with light and shadow more than a delivered story. Without words, a silent horror film has to rely on its visuals to unsettle audiences. One of the most effective styles of silent horror was the German Expressionism movement. German Expressionist films are characterized by prioritizing visual style over realism, including sets that looked more like a painting than real life, and performances that are theatrical and raw, giving greater insights into the feelings of characters. In a way, these films combine aspects of painting and live theater to create a wholly unique film experience. One of the films that mastered expressionist set design is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. This film was revolutionary for the horror genre, being one of the first films with horror themes and a narrative to support the horror, rather than short films like The Haunted Castle. The set design in Caligari is completely separate from reality and serves a dual purpose. On one hand, the visual frame being filled with harsh lines and false light and sharp angles creates this pervasive distrust that the characters in the film all feel. If you can't trust the construction of reality or the interaction of light and shadow, how can you trust your neighbors when there's a serial killer on the loose? On the other hand, the twisted visuals very simply make the audience uncomfortable, making the horror on screen more effective. There's no safe space for the audience to hide or take comfort in. Everything is so unfamiliar, odd, and detached from reality that it creates this sense of dread that covers the entire film. Nosferatu, released 2 years after Caligari, and trades the surreal set design for harsh shadows and powerful performances. The best, most haunting scenes in this movie arise from the use of shadow and the theatrical performances of characters opposing the static nature of Count Orlok. The use of shadow to paint Count Orlok against a wall is used multiple times throughout the film, and creates tension so effectively because you can't see Orlok, but you know that he's there, and it makes his silhouette very direct, with the subtly not human aspect of his design causing discomfort. Orlok is human-shaped, but he has disgusting claws and pointy ears which betray his humanity and unsettle the audience. The theatricality of the performances in this movie similarly cause fear in the audience because it expresses so much overwhelming terror upon seeing Count Orlok, which is passed on to the audience, and it becomes more impactful because of how distinctly subtle Count Orlok is. Both performances unsettle the audience because of how they play off of each other. One is more over the top in displaying fear than most people would be, and the other performance is unsettling because of how little performance there is. These two films are masters of silent horror because they don't need a plot to be scary. Everything that unsettles the audience is purely visual, and this idea bleeds over into the best of the silent drama films. Silent dramas rely on a plot more than silent horror, but they used stylized visuals and theatrical performances to convey the emotions developed through the narrative. Silent dramas are more difficult to do properly due to the challenge of providing a narrative without spoken dialogue. Despite this obstacle, the best silent dramas sidestep this by utilizing some of the principles of expressionism, along with really powerful writing that can impact the audience even without visuals. Alfred Hitchcock's film The Lodger is a great example of this, fitting into a thriller genre that isn't purely horror but also not purely drama. The film takes place in London and centers around a series of murders perpetrated by someone who wanders the streets of London and takes residence in various lodges around the city. This film is sort of like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from an outsider perspective, focusing on the mystery of the killings rather than following the perpetrator himself. This film succeeds both because of the engaging writing that makes you question every aspect of the mystery, but also because of the theatrically over-the-top performances that can tell you how someone feels without a word being spoken. This use of theatricality is the key to making a great silent drama, because the expression will tell you so much and important nuance can be filled in with dialogue flashed on screen. This use of theatricality is perfected in The Passion of Joan of Arc, a film with both amazing performances and great directing that highlights the face of characters above all else. The film shows you the hate in the judge's eyes, the sadness that Joan feels being judged, and shows her acceptance while she is being burned at the stake. Without any dialogue, the film makes it clear how these characters feel, and then it sparingly uses intertitles to connect these strong emotions. Rather than being primarily writing connected by emotional beats like most drama films, silent dramas are primarily strong emotions connected by light dialogue. Unlike black and white films, which are sometimes replicated for a stylistic choice, modern filmmakers don't make silent movies anymore or even use the intertitles, which are a trademark of silent films. The closest thing to a modern silent film is the 1995 anthology film Lumiere and Company, which tasked 40 directors with creating silent films with the same constraints that the Lumiere brothers had in the 19th century. Each director had to use the camera that the Lumiere brothers used. Each of their short films was limited to less than a minute, and they were limited to 3 takes. It's interesting to see what each director came up with and how different artists approach these limitations. Most silent films feel so distant both because they don't have the sound, but also because of the stylistic differences between the early 20th century and the late 20th century, so it's fascinating to see what then contemporary directors were able to do without the conveniences of modern filmmaking. Silent films are sort of a relic of the past, but that doesn't stop them from being interesting. Silent films, especially early on, were so limited in what they could do, so it's fascinating to see what early filmmakers were able to accomplish with such a bare set of tools. The Passion of Joan of Arc is my favorite silent film because of how much emotion is portrayed by the faces, and it feels like a great theater performance more than an attempt to make a movie with limited tools. There are tons of other great silent films though, so let me know your favorite in the comments. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more videos every other Thursday.